is Unbridled with Susan Kayne, presented by Thoroughbred. Family owned and operated since 1949. Thoroughbred produces specially designed horseshoes, racing plates, and therapeutic products to enhance equine performance. Learn more at thoroughbredinc.com.
Hello everyone, I'm Susan Kayne and you're watching Unbridled. Today's episode is dedicated to building a firm foundation, one that you can ride on for a long time. We've all heard the expression, no hoof, no horse. And nowhere is that truer than in the world of competitive horse sports. It is sometimes the very difference between winning and losing. Today's guests are today's leaders in the field of hoof care. Connie Larson, a world-renowned nutrition research scientist with Zinpro Corporation, and Andrew Elsbree, well known for shoeing numerous world champion saddlebreds. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. It's my privilege to be here, and certainly a privilege for our viewers at home. Connie, I'm going to get started with you. You are a nutrition research scientist, and I understand that in layman's terms as the study of the absorption of trace minerals. Is that an accurate description?
That's very accurate. I've been involved with studying the effect of trace minerals for absorption in livestock, and then the numerous roles that it can have and the impact we can make by good, balanced, sound nutrition. And as we look at the horse specifically, we're very interested in hoof quality, and is there something we can do for the horse owner through their nutrition programs to help improve integrity of that foot.
And in your research, do you find that different animals absorb nutrition differently?
Well, there certainly are some differences between different types of animals based on the stomach that they have. When we look at the horse, they have a simple stomach, which is comparatively different from, say, a cow that would have a fermentation type process happening before it came to the true stomach. But when we look at trace minerals and how they are absorbed and what functions they do, it's very similar across all different types of animals, whether it's a horse or a dog, a cat, a cow, or a pig. It's very similar.
And Zinpro is very well known for research in the cattle field. Now, is that research a resource for you when you then go to apply those studies to horses?
Oh, certainly. We can look at the depth of data that we have in dairy cattle and beef cattle and understand, for instance, as we talk about the hoof and we look at the wall structure of that, they're very similar between those animals, and once that mineral gets absorbed and how it impacts growth or characteristics of that hoof wall, it's very much the same. And so I think it's always important to look at other advances you've made in other areas and see how you can apply those in the current area that you're interested in.
And how do you know if the equine hoof is actually benefiting from the mineral it is supposed to be absorbing?
That's always a question, and that as a company we're very dedicated to looking at the science behind our products, and can we understand the absorption and what can we measure. We measure numerous things besides hoof quality, but when we start looking at hoof quality, we could look at how the hoof wall grows. We can look at the strength of that hoof wall. We could look, for instance, if an animal has cracks or problems in that hoof wall, and if we feed product, does that go away? And so we can take those types of measurements and then apply them the best we can for the horse owner.
And how do you initially design a study, with a control group or a research group to, determine the actual results and outcome?
Well, that's always a challenge, is to find a good group of horses that are very similar. And then we need to have them treated very much the same, whether they're having a control. And in our cases, a control doesn't mean they don't get any trace minerals. It means that they get a certain type, and then we compare that to equal levels of what we have. Then we go through a period of feeding the two treatments and taking the measurements. And this type of work that we're talking about is not invasive upon the animals at all, and we're not having any negative impacts. We're just wanting to make improvements and being able to measure that.
And how closely related is that work or study with a farrier, like Andrew, to help monitor the course of the research?
Well, we always need somebody. While we understand the nutrition portion very well, it always helps to bring somebody else in with their expertise in the farrier work of the hoof. And so we rely upon farriers being involved as well.
Can you tell when you look at a hoof if it is healthy, and when you work on it, what do you learn from it then?
Absolutely. When we get working on a hoof and cutting into it and preparing it for the shoes, you can tell the difference right away in the texture and the way it holds up, and even the stress lines in the hoof itself will show you whether that's a healthy foot in a good environment or not.
And what type of integrity in the hoof do you look for? I mean, is it anything an owner can see? Does it look a certain way? Or we hear about rings in a foot, or telling of something?
I would say simply, if you just look at the outside or the bottom of the foot, it should be intact and not shelly, breaking up, cracks coming up the foot. The wall should not be peeling off. And on the bottom of the foot, the white line should be in constant contact, not splitting or separating, and the hoof wall well attached to the foot. That's what we look for the most.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you face in shoeing horses and giving them proper hoof care for their discipline?
Well, first of all, a horse's own conformation could be its worst enemy in that case. And if the foot gets out of balance, you'll have some delamination of the wall and peeling of the wall. Environment is definitely playing a huge part in that role. Too dry, too wet, and poor feet. If a horses aren't well taken care of, their feet aren't well taken care of, and they're not getting the nutrition that they need, it'll show up in the feet sooner than later usually.
And horses' feet are living, dynamic structures. And I have a question, actually, I'm going to pose for both of you to answer, one at a time, of course. And that is, we have to assume that horses are born with healthy feet for the most part. Where do we go wrong? Where do we end up with so many bad feet, so many hoof problems that prohibit performance? What is your take on that, Connie?
Well, I would say that it's right. They start out fairly normal as a young horse. I think a lot of things that can impact that horse as it grows older and as it is utilized can determine what's going to happen to that foot. One of the things we do like to think about, though, for our young growing horses is starting them off right on a good nutrition program. We have challenges oftentimes with possibly overfeeding some of our young horses. So we want good nutrition, but not necessarily excess nutrition. And then as we progress, the nutrition is a component to the whole scheme, because not only can it be nutrition, but then certainly management comes into play, environment, the farriers and how they're handling those horses all impact that. So it becomes something that's a multitude of things that impact that horse's hoof quality throughout the course of its life.
And Andrew, what do you see as the biggest challenges that we end up with bad feet?
Well, we end up with bad feet a lot of times through things that we do and trying to get the hoof growth to keep up with the horse and his performance and the environment he's in. A lot of times I'll go and shoe a horse, take care of a horse that has bad feet, and then the owner or the caregiver will ask me, should I be feeding him something to help his feet? Well, he has bad feet now. You should have been feeding him something to help his feet from the beginning. It takes a long time to get trace minerals and the things, the building blocks for a good foot into the foot. And they need to be making sure from the beginning that that's there right along. And then we won't get to that spot where it's going to take a year to grow out a new hoof. You need everything in that horse's life working towards helping with changing their feet, from their nutrition to their exercise to their shoeing to the schedule of their shoeing and their foot care. You can't really have one part without the other. It takes exercise to get the heart rate up and to get the feet growing, and they need the building blocks to have the raw materials to build the hoof with. So really you need everything going right from the beginning.
And when those raw materials are not there, what are the challenges that you face in trying to maintain proper shoeing on that type of hoof?
Well, the feet can deteriorate to such a spot where you can't nail the shoes in nail the shoes on very well and keep them nailed on. Horses lose shoes. Horses become sore. The wall's peeling up. I've worked on some horses that are actually standing on their sole, and you need to have wall grown there. Some horses have what seems like a fairly good foot, but they don't have a normal growth cycle. The average horse is going to grow about a 1/4 inch of hoof wall a month, and some horses won't grow a 1/4 inch of hoof wall in 6 months. And it's hard to keep them sound, hard to keep that foot without replacing it good. And then you get into gluing shoes on and all sorts of things that are expensive just to keep the horse performing. And they're good fixes, but they're not long lasting.
How can an owner or a caregiver tell if a horse has a deficiency, and can a bad hoof be made good through nutrient changes? Can a bad hoof be changed to a good hoof through proper nutrition? Connie?
Susan, those are very good questions, and I think earlier Andrew's response and how the hoof can look for a healthy hoof are excellent guidelines at what you look for. One of the things as we consider nutrition in that foot, what's happening on the inside to build the hoof you're going to see months later on the outside is a slow process. And so in other words, as a deficiency starts to occur and we start having deterioration, it's not going to be an overnight change, but rather you're going to notice that the outside appearance over time is not going to appear normal, and you may see the cracking or the shelly type of hoof or breaking off. The sole can change in appearance due to bad nutrition or poor nutrition, or maybe even it's just unbalanced nutrition that has created these problems.
What are some of the things that prohibit a horse from absorbing nutrition that would benefit their hoof?
Well, as we look at nutrients that are important for that horse's hoof to grow, it certainly isn't just trace minerals like we've talked about quite a bit this morning, but a balance of the protein, the energy, the minerals, and vitamins. However, it's probably the trace elements that we have the most complication as far as other factors that can interact and prohibit absorption. And it's kind of interesting, as we feed trace elements to animals, sometimes it does become quite a challenge because there are other diet components that can tie them up. Or trace elements are kind of funny in that sometimes they're even antagonistic towards one another. So it becomes having the right balance and recognizing balance and moderation, that more is not always better in this instance.
Do horses require different trace minerals according to the demands that are placed on them?
I don't think that we would say they require different trace minerals. What I would say is that as we take a horse and we put stress on it, whether that stress is from a young growing horse, whether we have mares in lactation, or late pregnancy and going into lactation, breeding stallions, and then certainly all of our athletes that are performing so hard for us, it doesn't change what minerals they need, but rather possibly the level of minerals, because as we put more demands on that horse, then their zinc and copper requirements are going to increase slightly.
Now, what prohibits the horse from attaining the right balance and right level of minerals through their normal daily diet of hay and grain?
I think that's an excellent question. Oftentimes it's not the diet itself that's prohibiting, it's what's been selected for that horse to eat. And so as we consider good solid nutrition, we need to take into account the total needs for that horse. And so if we can put a good solid diet in front of that horse with the right combination of vitamin and minerals at the right levels, then everything should click in good order and work very well for that animal. I think sometimes it's us as owners making some of the decisions that become more of a problem than the diets themselves.
How does an owner make a choice? What is the right supplement? All we ever seem to hear about is biotin, biotin, biotin. Can you tell us what biotin is? Is it beneficial? And how do we know, how the claims of biotin are backed up?
That's a good point, because certainly as we look at hoof supplements, biotin is always a key element that people are looking for, and certainly those people marketing those products are highlighting that as well because it's become well known. Biotin itself is a vitamin, and so it's something that the horse can having its diet. And what it does for the hoof specifically is as the hoof wall is forming, it comes in the very last stages and glues all the cells together. It's almost like thinking of the cells as bricks, and then the biotin working in a substance that's like the mortar that glues them together. So certainly biotin has a role, and the research that's been done has shown improvements in horses that have very shelly, brittle feet respond to biotin supplementation. The problem, though, is biotin by itself is not totally effective. That once again, we need to be balanced. We can't just feed biotin, but certainly the trace mineral zinc, copper, and even manganese can be important in helping build those cells properly, so we're getting good solid bricks in that hoof wall, and then the biotin comes into play to glue them together. So we're looking at nutrients that work together to give us a good final product.
And in those nutrients that work together, as a horse owner, I often hear about biotin and methionine. Forgive me if I don't pronounce it properly, you can correct me on that. Is there a certain relationship between biotin and methionine?
It's actually methionine, but you're close. I knew
close.
what you were talking about. That's true. There's a lot of, I almost call it a little bit of hype about methionine. When we look at nutrient requirements of horses right now, there is not one listed for methionine. The research hasn't proven that, but certainly as we look at its being incorporated into some of those proteins, it has gotten a lot of attention for hoof supplements. I would say that methionine in those supplements can certainly help, but methionine, once again, isn't the nutrient doing it all by itself. I would suggest for hoof supplements that they look. I think how most supplements get out of balance refers back to a question you asked previously: how do we make these decisions? When I think about the horse owner going to their local feed store, they can walk into the shelf and they can buy something for the hoof, something for the joint, something for the coat, something that's more all natural and herbal. They go home and they mix these all up. They make their own recipe how to feed their horse, and what they've done in essence is get things out of balance. It's not often something that will have an overnight effect. Again, it's not extremely toxic, but it's put things out of balance, and over that time, then it's a case where more has been harmful rather than feeding more moderate levels.
Mustad has a product called the Right Balance, and I certainly appreciate that name after hearing how important it is to feed the right balance of trace minerals as a supplement for hoof growth. You've done some research relative to that. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
The Right Balance, I think that company, Mustad, has done a very good job of bringing into that product the nutrients targeted for hoof growth, and I think they've done a good job at their levels. Our company has worked at evaluating the zinc source that they include in that product so that that zinc source is more available to the horse and we get better absorption. So I think the name really says a lot because it is a balance, and that I think it's a good solid product out there to impact the hoof quality that those farriers will see over time a change as they visit those horses.
And what are some of the beneficial side effects to feeding proper nutrients in the proper balance?
Well, I think whenever we feed proper nutrients in the proper balance, the benefits are much more far-reaching than what we've discussed here, just looking at hoof quality. Certainly nutrition will impact that horse's ability to perform. It will impact even the immunity of that animal, which can be very important. It can impact that coat. We like our horses to be very bright and shiny, and good nutrition shows itself through those avenues. So again, while we focused on the hoof, there's a lot of benefits throughout the entire horse that can be captured by good solid nutrition.
So the right balance is critical to the overall performance of the horse on multiple levels.
I think so.
And Andrew, I know that you put the right balance underneath the horse. Now that you've heard what Connie has to say about the right balance in nutrients, will you be recommending it to your customers?
Absolutely. I think it's very imperative that the customer and the caregiver of the horse be proactive in the feeding of the horse so that we can grow a good, strong, healthy hoof.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much, Connie. It's been an absolute privilege to be here with both of you, and I'm sure our viewers at home have learned something new too. The hoof is a dynamic, living structure, and for peak performance in any horse sport, it's critical that your horse has the right balance underfoot and in his or her body.
Next time on Unbridled.
Certified Journeyman Farrier, Esther Benedict. Esther, you are a farrier and a maker of spectacular artwork.
Thank you.
Can you tell us how your farrier work led to these beautiful line sculptures?
Sure. At the very beginning of my farrier career, I really knew nothing at all about working metal. So I started making hot handmade shoes and hot rasping, and because of the hot rasping, during that time you would see where the color came in. And I thought, well, if you could control that, maybe something could be done with that. And then I also learned to weld and braze, and through that and 16 years of practice, I decided to try some artwork. So I started with the line sculpture because it was a familiar medium, the steel, and then I went on to create different styles of horses and breeds, and it's led me to where I am today.
And it's fastened down so we don't get the wind noise. We've gone to like a peak style building. It's more traditional look, matches in with existing buildings most people have. We can go to many different colors.
Silicon is something that's very abundant in nature, but generally not in a biologically available form, meaning that the horse cannot take it up through the digestive tract. Monosilicic acid is a form of silicon that actually is very biologically available. It's very concentrated and very easy for the horse to assimilate. So the object here is to get some silicon into the horse. It will help to facilitate the uptake of calcium and phosphorus into the bone. It will make the bone stronger by increasing the mineralization, and the cortex and the matrix of the bone will be stronger. And it also plays a role in improving the strength of connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, any type of soft tissue.
Generally, though, when people treat white line, they tend to think of the problem at the foot. But the problem is really not in the foot, it's in the inside of the horse, it's the immune system. And, thrush and white line needs to really be treated from the inside out.
I work with kids, and together at the farm, we teach kids that good can come from situations that look totally hopeless. And in this particular case, Cupid had a little secret. And the secret was...
That's next week on Unbridled with Susan Kayne.